Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the expression military occupation or occupation. The occupation is one of the most misunderstood and misused terms bantered about today. When referring to the Middle East, the occupation, in quotation marks, is always spoken in a derisive tone. And it is almost always spelled with a capital T for the and a capital O for occupation. For many years, and for so many people, the occupation is to blame for all the evils in the Middle East. It is the root of all the problems in the region. For many, Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is the cause of all the problems of the Middle East and of the Palestinians. No matter what the issue, it always comes back to the occupation. The fact is, however, that an occupation is not what most think an occupation is. In ancient times, for example, a military occupation was commonplace. After Rome conquered the region, for instance, it was common practice for the Roman legions to move on, leaving behind a skeleton military crew. That skeleton crew was responsible for maintaining order and collecting tributes and, of course, taxes for Rome. Fast forward to the modern era, and you will realize that there have been literally hundreds and hundreds of examples of military occupations. The modern concept of military occupation is defined in the Hague Convention of 1907. Relevant sections are found in the Laws and Customs of War and Land, on Land, Hague 4, 18th of October 1907, Section 3, Military Authority over the Territory of Hostile State. Article 42, for instance, says, territory is considered occupied when it is actually placed under the authority of the hostile army. The occupation extends only to the territory where such authority has been established and can be exercised. And then we have Article 43, the authority of the legitimate power having in fact passed into the hands of the occupant. The latter shall take all the measures in his power to restore and ensure, as far as possible, public order and safety, while respecting, unless absolutely prevented, the laws enforced in the country. In other words, the occupier is supposed to and is expected to ensure order. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States occupied Germany and Japan. These U.S. occupations were military occupations. The most important purpose of these post-war occupations was to set up civilian infrastructures that would lead to the establishment of a foundation for self-governing after the war and after the occupation. And that, by the way, is one of the definitions of occupation. An occupation is temporary. Annexing the territory in question transfers the area from becoming occupied to becoming permanent part of the occupant's sovereignty or their sovereign territory. The very first term described in this kind of region in dealing with the occupied is referred to as the conquest territory. So the United States occupied Germany and Japan after World War II. Those occupations in Germany and Japan led to medical, educational, judicial, bureaucratic, civil, and national systems that permitted the Germans and the Japanese to self-govern. Those occupations created the infrastructure for the most powerful economies of the mid and late 20th century. Economies that, for a certain time, outstripped even the United States in productivity. Can you imagine that? To this very day, Japan and Germany have powerful economies and societies, all because of the foundations that were based on the U.S. occupations after World War II. Certainly, there were those in Germany and those in Japan who saw the U.S. as interlopers and outsiders who had no right to occupy. But just as certainly, that did not dissuade many German and Japanese women who married U.S. GIs as a way to escape to the Golden Medina, the golden land of the United States of America. The purpose of an occupation is to set the groundwork for a transition. And yet, of the hundreds of occupations that have occurred in the recent past and the dozens, yes, dozens that are in place today, The world has chosen to focus almost exclusively on Israel and its occupation of the West Bank. Israel, in fact, did annex Jerusalem on July 30th, 1980. And Israel did annex the Golan Heights on December 15th, 1981. Neither the international community nor the United Nations recognized these annexations. But the essential definitional point is that Israel did not view the status of these areas as temporary. That's why they annexed them. In Israel's views, both Jerusalem and the Golan Heights were to be permanently brought within the sovereign control of Israel. And that included the Arabs and the Jews living there. Today, there are about 400,000 Arabs living in Jerusalem and about 300,000 Jews living in those 12 neighborhoods that are annexed in that part of Jerusalem. The vast majority of Israelis do not want to occupy the entire West Bank. De facto, Israel has annexed the Jewish communities there and the settlements there because Israeli law considers them to be living as if they were in Tel Aviv, Haifa, or Beersheba. They are seen and understood under the concept of Israeli law. Israel wants Jews to be able to live peacefully in their homes. And the people who choose to live there want to live peacefully together with the Palestinians. However, in the absence of Palestinian leadership and in the aftermath of October 7th, 2023, the massacre, it has become clear that Palestinians do not want to live together with Israelis. Palestinian poll after Palestinian poll confirms that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians do not even believe that Hamas perpetrated the massacre on October 7th. As of now, there is a desire for peace on only one side, and so the occupation will continue. No other alternative exists. No other alternative exists. Coming up next, points of view. I want to show you two excellent columns today. The first is from the Wall Street Journal, and the second is from Ynet. The first deals with the plague of Jew hatred that we are experiencing, and the second gives a recipe for Israel's success in Gaza. So first up is the column from the Wall Street Journal. It's written by Cynthia Ozick, who was one of the greatest novelists of the last 100 years. She is an unabashed lover of Israel and a proud Jew. She does not pull punches. Her short stories are profound, and her essays, like this one, are always insightful and lend assistance in approaching issues at hand. In our case, Jew hatred. This essay was published on June 3rd, 2025, again in the Wall Street Journal. It is entitled Anti-Semitism and Politics of Chant. Subtitled, The Hatred is Familiar from History, but the Sound is a Novelty. Ozick begins by quoting Gustav Lindauer, describing how his German and Jewish identities cooperate with one another. She then explains, to read these words now, knowing how such widespread sentiments were massively betrayed, is to succumb to pathos. But replace German with American, and they spring into living truth. Intimate, precious duality in unity has long been the premise and promise of American for its Jewish citizens. Until October 8, 2023, the day after the hellish massacre of peacenik families in Israeli communes and young people at a music festival, when this healthy confidence fell apart and turned into something close to panic, have we come to the end of a golden age? Has it been delusionary? The formerly open doors of synagogues, schools, community centers, libraries, museums, auditoriums now have guards, entry codes, or both. These extremist measures came about seemingly overnight. Ozick now describes what these pro-Hamas protesters are doing and how it is organized and destructive. She writes, with them, we see streets, highways, bridges, public and private spaces, and most notoriously, university campuses flooded with hundreds of marchers with bullhorns, Hamas flags, commercially printed slogans on sticks. Ozick traces the historical similarities to the Romans, the KKK, Father Coughlin, Chicago, and the Nazis. She says it is a keffiyeh and a mask now. She writes that these phalanxes wear a uniform emblematic of the will to assert crushing force, is not without precedent. The Roman helmet, the white hood, the ranting radio priest collar, the armband with its swastika, and now the keffiyeh. Clearly a recognizable social movement, these bristling stalwarts rise as another menacing ism to add to the last century's fascism and communism. Call it pro-Palestinianism, anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, or plain English Jew hate. Cynthia Ozick understands rhythm and rhyme, beat and meter. She explains that the chants for pro-Hamas protesters are enchanting. She writes, yet despite its historical longevity, and in contradiction to its increasingly familiarity, this ritualized organism of disruption bursts into novelty. Where so much is stale, the hijacking of human rights vocabulary, crude denials of verifiable fact, schooling as propaganda, something new is in the air. Musical, catchy, rhythmic, rhyming, mesmerizing, a powerful beat frequently intensified by drums. As he was led away in handcuffs, Elias Rodriguez, the alleged shooter of 2 young Israeli embassy aides at the Washington Capitol's Jewish Museum, sang out almost mechanically, as if turned on by a key, "Free, free Palestine." The syllables sing themselves. So do "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and globalize the Intifada. And resistance is justified when people are occupied. And there is only one solution: Intifada revolution. And say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here. And on and on. Now Ozick concludes that this phenomenon has its old foundations, but it is truly a new cult. She writes, multiplied by 1,000 throats, these rumbles and roars let out a crashing thunder, a delirium of dervish-like self-intoxication, rushing on in oceanic waves, undermining reason and drowning thought. Here, there is no history, no honest journalism, no honorable discourse, no argument, no analytic engagement. Not so much as a coherent sentence. What we are hearing is the cruel zeal of an up-to-date hypnotic cultism, the politics of chant, a new sound in the wind. Thank you, Cynthia Ozick, for a truly insightful piece. Next up is a column by Ron Ben-Ishai from Ynet, published on June 8th, 2025, and it's entitled, Whoever Controls Gaza, Peace Requires Destroying Hamas Tunnel Network. Subtitled, Commentary. Despite mounting criticism over the war's duration, if Hamas preserves even part of its underground tunnel network, the threat to southern Israel will quickly return. Troop safety must not be compromised for the sake of speed. It's an unbelievable piece. This is how Ron Ben-Ishai begins. The war the IDF is waging in Gaza Strip is neither a war of survival nor one of rebirth, but it is a just war, and above all, a necessary one. It can and should be described as the war for the peace of the South, because as long as Hamas and roughly a half dozen other armed Islamic jihadist factions remain active in the enclave and have capacity to recover, physical security for residents of the Negev region will remain out of reach, and normal life will remain impossible. It is in this context that we must see the deaths of 4 Israeli soldiers and the wounding of 5 others from the Commando Brigade. Ben-Ishai explains why their deaths were not in vain. He explains why and how essential it is to destroy Hamas. Their deaths were not in vain, he writes. They fell on a mission aimed at securing the release of the hostages and, more broadly, to allow residents of southern Israel to raise their children and make a living. As we assess the current fighting in Gaza, it is essential to separate political considerations from military actions. Israel has lived under the threat of Gaza since the state's founding. The conclusion is clear. Hamas, PIJ, and the Popular Resistance Committees remain dangerous. If allowed to rebuild, they could, within 5 to 10 years, reestablish an underground threat that would again make life unbearable for southern Israeli communities. Ben-Ishai explains that Hamas has studied IDF movements and knows what the IDF is doing. He writes, Hamas has studied IDF operational tactics and knows that troops will enter these buildings. And the simplest way to protect soldiers is by demolishing the building, either with an airstrike or an armored D9 bulldozer. This neutralizes the explosives, but has a major drawback. Once the building collapses, the tunnel shafts beneath it are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to locate. The IDF is acutely aware of the dangers involved in entering buildings that may be rigged with explosives and booby traps. To mitigate the risk, it uses a variety of measures, including heavy fire on suspected buildings without completely destroying them, and deploying dogs, miniature drones, and robots, and other classified technologies. This is an excellent column. As everything Ram Benishai writes, it has spectacular insight into what's happening in the region and militarily. Thank you, Ram Benishai. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 6 cartoons today collected from around the world. They deal with food aid to Gaza, humanitarian aid to Gaza. They are biting, and most are based on falsehoods. This first cartoon is entitled Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF, Aid Sniper Box. The premise is that Palestinians who came to get food at the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, were shot by Israel. But the GHF is a U.S. organization. It is an organization that has the backing of the U.S. administration and the Israeli government. It is giving out aid, and that makes certain that it is not stolen from Hamas, and by Hamas, But Hamas shot the Palestinians, not Israel. But Hamas said it was Israel, and hence this cartoon and many headlines around the world declared that Israel was shooting the Palestinians who were coming for food. What an atrocity. Next up is a cartoon from India. It is entitled Gaza War, Between War and Famine. Gaza is locked in the Star of David and is being pulled apart by war on the one side and famine on the other, both dressed as the Grim Reaper. Again, Israel has proven how much food is in Gaza, and until now, Hamas has stolen it and sells it at exorbitant prices. Now the market prices are coming down because free food is safely being distributed by Israel and the United States. This third cartoon is by the same artist from India. His name is Parish. The cartoon is entitled Gaza is a Target, and people are starving inside the target as rockets are landing all around. In this fourth cartoon, again, it's about humanitarian aid. A loaf of bread is being cut by an Israeli knife, and then the slices are set up as tombstones. The title of the cartoon is Gaza Aid, Dead Bread, Graves. This cartoon was published, by the way, in England. The fifth cartoon, also from England, depicts Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, on the wall with an oar, and at the end is a piece of pita bread. He is dangling it over the hands of people trying to grab it. And finally, our sixth and last cartoon today depicts Bibi again, this time in a tank with binoculars, looking at Gaza, saying, once the civilians are emaciated enough, Hamas won't be able to hide behind them anymore. This cartoon is from France. It's actually entitled Lawless War. This message presented here is simply sick and totally untrue. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the smashing of a Supreme Court window during a protest in Jerusalem. In a statement issued on his behalf, his office said, I strongly condemn any sign of violence of any kind, especially against any government authorities. Netanyahu added that he, quote again, calls on public leaders and law enforcement agencies to condemn and act decisively against all manifestations of violence and incitement without exception. President Isaac Herzog addressed the very same issue, the damage to the Supreme Court window, writing that the Supreme Court is one of the pillars of Israeli democracy. An attack on it and its seat is crossing a dangerous red line. Violence, incitement, and vandalism are absolutely unacceptable and must be firmly eliminated. Diplomats told the British Guardian, the media site, that unilateral recognition of the Palestinian state by Western nations is unlikely at the international conference that France and Saudi Arabia plan to hold next month in New York City, to implement the two-state solution as revealed by Ynet. Quote, the organizers hoped that the conference would push Western governments to recognize a Palestinian state, but the determination has decreased, and instead they hope to agree on steps towards recognition, unquote. That's a quote from Ynet. Tal Kuperstein, father of hostage Bar Kuperstein, spoke at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv and said that Bar has been in the tunnels for 50 meters underground for 610 days without food, without daylight. How does he sleep? Is he wounded? He is also dealing with fear from IDF bombardments. According to him, we need a deal now that will get him and all the hostages out. I call on the Prime Minister to agree to a deal where everyone returns home now. Reports indicate that the head of the Al-Mujahideen Brigade's terror organization, responsible for the murder of the Bibas family, has been eliminated in the Gaza Strip. The organization also held hostages Gadi Chagai, Judy Weinstein, and Nathapung Pinta, whose bodies were recovered from Gaza. The American Aid Foundation, GHF, which we were speaking about in the cartoon segment, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, published a statement accusing Hamas of disrupting aid distribution in the region. The statement indicated that Hamas directly threatened the foundation's teams, making it too dangerous to continue operations without risking innocent lives. The foundation also noted that Hamas is attempting to regain control over aid systems and exploit them for its own purposes while compromising the basic needs of the population. Also regarding the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, the GHF, they announced that it has conducted a pilot program of direct distribution to residents, not just at aid centers, but elsewhere. And according to the fund, 29 food trucks were actually distributing food elsewhere. Additionally, the fund noted that the distribution at aid sites was carried out without incidents. Reserve Captain Ron Feiner, who completed 270 days of reserve duty, refused to report for another round of reserve service on ideological grounds, and he was sentenced to 25 days in prison for refusing to serve. Feiner was involved in the struggle to return hostages, even at the cost of halting the war. He's a part of the group called Soldiers for Hostages Group. And they stated, especially today, after an unbearable week of bereavement and serious concerns about harm to hostages due to military pressure, refusing to continue reporting for war duty is warranted, and we support him, the group said. Ron demonstrated courage, they said, on the battlefield, and now shows courage in refusing. It is essential for us to understand that there are serious splits in Israel about how to approach the war and how to get the hostages home. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. This 3.5-minute clip is of United States Vice President J.D. Vance being interviewed by comedian Theo Von. I show you this video because it best depicts the way average Americans look at the issue, the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the battle between Israel and Gaza, and how the Trump administration sees the Israeli-Hamas conflict. It is not bad or negative. It is illustrative. Theo Von is not anti, neither is Vice President Vance. If anything, they are both passionately dispassionate about either side. They just want killing and conflict to end. not just here, but also in Ukraine and Russia. Watch this video.
I think the tough thing just as a regular person, right? It's like we're seeing all these videos of people like picking up pieces of their children, and like,
of course,
it's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised. Basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being televised,
sad, man.
It feels like a massacre, and it feels like, I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you too. But I think where it gets scary is that we give, we're complicit in it because we help fund like military stuff, and that's where as like a regular guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes and they're going towards this, like, but you can't do anything, like you can talk, but it's like, you can't. I don't understand how it becomes like tough for people. Like sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, like, I think you're a great dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard, and I think they're trying to, like, sort of destroy this terrorist organization, and war is hell, and that is true. I also think it's true, man. I mean, I've seen people on my side of the political aisle. I'm a Republican, you know that, but your audience may not, who like will see these videos of these innocent Palestinian kids and say, oh, well, they had it coming to them. No. Like if you have a soul, your heart should break when you see a little kid who's suffering, which is why we have the policy that we have, which is we're trying to eliminate the conflict, eliminate the source of the conflict, so that we can actually bring some peace and some humanitarian assistance into people. And that's my basic view. And the president's interesting. He's a pro-Israel guy.
Yeah.
And he also recognizes that to bring any conflict to a close, you've got to talk to everybody. Yeah. And so, we've been attacked. I've been attacked. The president's been attacked for being too interested in diplomacy. And you ask, like, what can I do? I think that what people should demand is that if our tax dollars are going to something, we should be actively trying to fix it. Okay, that's kind of the way that I think about it. And what happened with the Biden administration, man, it's crazy. They were spending so much money all over the world, they weren't engaged in diplomacy at all. So we sent $300 billion to Ukraine, for example, and you never had the president of the United States actually trying to force a diplomatic settlement. You talk about bodies all over the ground. Dude, the Russia-Ukraine thing is the most vicious. We see satellite images, we see classified images, man. Yeah, it is vicious. And again, it's I will hear people who will say, well, they're, again, mostly on our side, will say, oh, these, the Russians got killed. That's a good thing. Look, I'm not defending the invasion. I'm not defending starting a war. But when human beings are getting blown to bits, your heart should feel sad about that. Yeah. And you should try to do something to fix it. And that's what we're trying to do. And we get crap for it. But again, that's like the part that makes me feel the best about my job, is whether it's in Israel or Russia, Ukraine, like, we're actually trying to bring this stuff to some settlement and to some close. And if we do, we're going to save a lot of lives. And if we don't, it was worth the try.
These views are representative of most Americans. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.